Europe is facing challenges that it has never faced before, from record-breaking temperatures to plummeting energy prices. Europe is struggling with a terrible energy crisis as the prices of natural oil are spiraling upward. Europe is facing a complex and uncertain economic outlook, making it hell for the general public and businessmen alike. Worker strikes and rapidly growing street protests in a number of cities demonstrate that millions of people are in pain. What are the factors responsible for this economic crisis? How can Europe cope with this crisis? Which European countries are dealing with the crisis better? With the Russia-Ukraine conflict raging for the past 10 months and no serious attempts at de-escalation, it appears that the conflict is destined to harm the balance of the world order, which was already dwindling. The ongoing conflict has pushed Europe into an energy crisis. Europe, which was already under stress as a result of the pandemic, became the site of this conflict, making the region even more vulnerable. With Russia weaponizing energy in response to Europe's support for Ukraine, the continent's energy security has become a major source of concern. The energy crisis had the greatest impact on the industrial sector because factories were the first to be targeted by governments to reduce energy use in order to save energy for the winter. Governments, households, and businesses are struggling with an energy and cost of living crisis largely caused by the Ukraine conflict. Many European countries are expected to enter a recession this winter as a result of high inflation and rapidly tightening monetary policy. Energy prices reached all-time highs in 2022, owing to Russia's unwarranted invasion of Ukraine and its use of Russian gas as a weapon of war. In the EU's internal market, the wholesale price of electricity is directly related to the price of gas, which is mostly imported. Russia's deliberate reduction of gas supplies is the primary cause of the recent skyrocketing gas prices in the EU, which has impacted the price of electricity produced in gas-fired power plants and affected overall electricity prices. Energy prices in the EU are expected to remain high in the coming months, as it takes time to replace Russian gas supplies with supplies from EU sources. Due to a lack of ample supply, the crisis has prompted electricity bills to skyrocket, negatively impacting citizens. Inflationary pressures on basic goods and services are causing demand-side shortage and slowing the economy. Increased input costs due to high inflation are certain to render the European industry uncompetitive globally, causing global supply chains to shift away from Europe and into other markets. Despite Russia's suspension of gas supplies to Europe, the region has been able to secure its energy needs for this winter by enacting legislation that encourages citizens to lower their energy bills, use public transportation, and be more efficient and mindful of usage. Even before the Russian gas supply was completely cut off, the European Union was able to store enough, with 90% of its gas storage facilities filled, to avoid a major energy crisis this winter. However, the winter of 2022 may be much more manageable than the winter of 2023. This is due to the fact that whatever output is available during the first half of 2023 will be significantly lower than what was available in the first half of 2022. According to the International Energy Agency, Europe faced this winter with 90% of its gas storage, which will not be the case next winter, because a significant portion was contributed by Russian gas, which will not be available anytime soon, and other energy sources, as China was sourcing less due to its economic slowdown, which may not be the case next year. Gas prices have fallen from their peak in recent months, making life a little easier for Europe during this crisis. But as the global economy recovers, especially with China ramping up its economic activities, there is going to be a global increase in demand for energy. It will really force Europe to fight for energy, resulting in a bidding war and higher prices. Although Europe has until the next winter to look for alternatives, the options are either time-consuming or expensive. For example, developing LNG terminals, which are needed for gas imports, takes approximately 2 to 5 years. Another option, like direct pipeline construction, will take 1.5 to 4 years. Europe is also considering renting floating LNG terminals, but this is not a long-term solution due to the high costs involved. It is also difficult to find investors willing to pour money into developing energy infrastructure that will be obsolete in the coming decades as the world shifts towards renewable energy sources in response to the climate crisis. The possibility of developing renewable energy sources is also on the table. However, both wind and solar energy, while relatively cheap and extremely easy to develop, cannot be employed for heating on a high level because most households only have gas-powered heating systems, and it will take more than a year to completely overhaul an entire country's heating system. Russia's energy supply to Europe is unlikely to be restored anytime soon. President Vladimir Putin's Russian government will keep on punishing Europe for its support for Ukraine. The Russian action of trying to disrupt their gas pipeline, Nord Stream 1 and 2, demonstrates that they do not intend to export fuel to Europe in the near future. Rather, they intend to prolong the crisis long enough to cause extremely high inflation in Europe, sparking popular unrest strong enough to overthrow governments. Finding a long-term replacement for Russian gas imports will be difficult for Europe. Although the U.S. has increased its LNG exports recently, it is highly unlikely that it will be able to compensate for the enormous demand. Although the U.S. has increased its LNG exports recently, it is pretty doubtful that it will be able to make up for the massive demand, because it has already reached capacity, and even the necessary infrastructure is insufficient to meet the unexpected surge in demand amidst Western sanctions on Russia. Relentlessly high prices could have long-term consequences, stripping away Europe's competitive edge in high-energy manufacturing activities, exacerbating market share losses, and provoking companies to move to countries with lower energy costs. Germany, which has a large manufacturing sector and uses a lot of energy in industrial production, appears to be particularly vulnerable to the effects of the energy crisis. While fears of deindustrialization may be exaggerated, Europe's policymakers must make difficult choices as they adjust to new geopolitical and energy market realities. The crisis is not restricted to Europe. In 2023, a spike in global energy demand could cause a global energy crisis, forcing countries to compete to secure their needs, and in this race, it is often the poorer and less developed countries that bear the brunt, as seen in cash-strapped countries like Ecuador, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Haiti, which are experiencing fuel shortages, energy inflation, and unrest. Governments in Europe have begun to implement a variety of policy responses. One type of policy seeks to lessen the impact of higher costs on consumers and businesses. Retail price caps, regulated tariffs, support programs for energy-intensive businesses, and liquidity or capital backing for energy companies, including nationalization, are examples of these. Another set of policies aims to stabilize and lower wholesale prices while also ensuring energy security. This includes policies to encourage energy conservation and increase supply, as well as policies to limit energy costs, particularly wholesale gas prices. All the European countries are trying to deal with the crisis in the best way they could, yet some definitely have an edge over others. To reduce its reliance on Russian gas, which is mostly delivered via pipelines, Europe as a whole is shifting towards liquefied natural gas. Soon after the war began, Italy began looking for alternative gas supplies from Azerbaijan, Algeria, and Egypt. Algeria, a major gas exporter located just across the Mediterranean Sea, was extremely helpful to Italy. Some countries such as Spain, France, and Italy have an advantage in the form of existing fixed LNG terminals over other European countries such as Germany, which has traditionally relied on pipeline gas. These countries, along with the UK, have the highest LNG import capacity in the region. Many others are turning to floating terminals, which can be set up in less time than permanent ones on land. Germany is spearheading this initiative, having recently completed the first of 5 planned floating LNG terminals. Once completed, Germany will enjoy one of the highest import capacities in Europe. Greece is also planning 5 floating LNG terminals, which could turn it into a hub for countries in southeastern Europe. However, as new projects come online, LNG from countries such as Qatar, Australia, and the US will take at least a couple of years to increase. What is required at the moment is a prompt and united response by all the countries. The key to solving the problems of uncertain supplies and high fuel prices lies in coordinated efforts and solidarity among countries. Clearly, the energy crisis is a massive challenge that no European country can face alone. Emergency interventions, such as gas price caps, risk exacerbating the situation, particularly if implemented as a mishmash of poorly coordinated national policies. The European Union must strike a grand bargain that places a premium on its capacity as an economic bloc and builds the course for EU energy policy. The decision made today about how to manage limited supply will shape the future of Europe's energy system. Deeper integration and increased investment can help Europe overcome the crisis while also accelerating the transition to cleaner, renewable, and more affordable energy. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in our next video.